Hi, everybody. Aftermarket revenue can represent 2 to 3 times the revenue of the initial sale of a product. Profit from aftermarket operations usually represents most, if not all, of the company profits, and it can be 4 times greater than that of equipment sales. Aftermarket is a long-term source of recurring revenue, and at a time when manufacturers are using industrial machines and equipment longer than their intended cycles, service and maintenance become a critical source of steady revenue.
Surely. So for me, top three, I'll start with customer-centric service excellence. This is about providing the most efficient service in the most cost-conscious way, right? So if you connect the product data directly to the service operations on the Salesforce side, technician now know exactly what needs to be done, right? So, for example, if a customer reports an issue and the technician can see the right configuration of the asset that he's going to work on, the correct spare part that would be required, and even the interactive work instructions, right? Then this would reduce the repeated visit. This would reduce the shorten the repair times, and it will improve the customer satisfaction. In the end, it also lowers cost because the work is more efficient now. So that's my first use case. The real value or the real deal would be, when you are able to grow your sales by selling more high profit services, right? This I refer as asset monetization, the second use case. Now, this is about turning service into a growth driver, into a growth driver. So once we have connected the product and service data with the sales processes in the Salesforce, right, we can start identifying newer opportunities. For instance, if a machine is due for a critical maintenance task, the system can recommend selling an upgrade, a service package, or an extended warranty, right? So this would help sales and service team upsell more efficiently, generate more revenue from the install base, and increase sales productivity, right? Now, if I take this further and I take it beyond the asset monetization, right? And if I provide sales with the tools to generate product quotes much simpler and faster, right? And that's the third use case that I call optimize opportunity to quote, right? Here, the Team Center product configurator together with Salesforce CPQ processes. Now, sales reps can build accurate quotes in minutes instead of days. And the rules are always in sync with the engineering because it is coming from Team Center, the product configurator rules. So what gets sold to the end customer can actually be delivered because it is in sync with the engineering and manufacturing from the Team Center side, right? So the big value here, what I see is the efficiency, reducing the configurator cost, faster turnaround, and higher sales productivity. This means now the sales team can spend more time, with the customer than on the system itself. So in summary, the values come from 3 areas: delivering the service right the first time, then turning service into a revenue with the second use case, and then making code faster and in sync with the engineering, right? So the key focus on the value drivers and for our customers, the key is to focus on the value drivers and what would create the most impact for the organization. So when they're preparing a business case, they should always be aligned to these value drivers that I talked about.
Thank you. That's very clear, Ashish. Now, Nanda, Ali, what should I look for to build my business case? So we just heard about these 3 use cases. Could you add a bit on top of that to and expand on, what should be the KPIs? Well, in other words, how would you recommend to get started? And
yeah, absolutely, Dom.
Yeah.
When you really think about if I'm a service leader, right, and having the responsibilities, the P&L responsibilities of the entire service operations that are carried on, there are several KPIs that I'm always focusing on. Obviously, CSAT continues to be my top priority, but apart from that, how am I actually able to reduce my operational costs? How am I increasing the efficiencies, productivity of all of my agents, technicians who are on the jobs, day in, day out? But more importantly, some of the service leaders are also now starting to carry the P&L responsibility of driving service revenue, right? What Ashish alluded to. So I need to be able to have the ability to really look at the various, touch points of being able to drive the service revenue while keeping the costs low. We actually at Salesforce run this, asset monetization workshops. And this is where we partner with the likes of, Siemens product teams as well, along with customers. And then we understand what is the customer experience, looks like from an end-to-end perspective. And what are all the various foundational building blocks, from a service execution standpoint, and as well as, from an asset lifecycle management, standpoint. And then we then identify what are all the various data points that actually lives native to Salesforce. And then what are the data points that actually, are mastered and maintained in Siemens, which needs to be, the system of records, but then as a system of reference, how do we bring some of those, data elements, right, in the context of driving that end-to-end experience? And the good news here is that Siemens and Salesforce, we've already partnered together. We've actually made it easy for you customers that we have an app exchange offering in Salesforce called Team Center for Salesforce. So now you have the ability, what you actually saw a preview during the demo is how you can actually bring some of the complex, rich asset bill of materials data, the service bill of materials data, the aftermarket parts, the service instructions, and then how do you bring it to bear in the context of a service agent helping a customer or in the context of a technician executing the job. So I think the good way would be that, connect with your Siemens or Salesforce account managers, and then we'll be happy to walk you through how this, end-to-end experience can come to reality for you.
Thank you. And Ali, could you add to that? Anything you could add from your perspective?
Yeah. So I'll take the other angle of this. So obviously we talked a lot about technology, and I think part of the reason why most of the attendees have showed up today was to hear how AI is going to impact the aftermarket and how it's going to help drive at new revenue outcomes for their business from a manufacturing perspective. But one area that I think we need to always come back to is the people side of this. So if I think about in an AI everywhere, in an environment where we're thinking about this massive shift in how technology is going to enable work, we need to ensure that our people, both your internal employees and also your customers, are involved in this transformation. And to do that, we need to, in my mind, shift the KPIs that we're leveraging to measure. It's important to measure first time fix and productivity and utilization, cost. That's obvious in my mind, but I think there's this whole nother set of KPI that are more customer focused and employee focused that I've started to see companies start to engage with. And in an AI environment, it's important to think about how value is created by those humans to those other humans being the customers. And so can we measure workforce engagement? Can we think about ways in which we're leveraging customer effort and that being improved? Can we think about ways in which the technologies we're investing in help to empower faster insights, right? So just speed to insights as opposed to mean time to resolution, and rethinking the way in which we value the people side of the business. And also think about how organizations can leverage these tools to improve process. These tools, technology isn't a panacea. It's not meant to just invest and then you are transformed on day one. Implementation is faster in a cloud environment. But I do think there's a way in which companies can rethink how the technologies that are being invested in can improve the process between the users and those that they are servicing, whether that be in the back office, the mid, or the front office. And I think that is where I see companies needing to start now as they build that business case around value that is expanded beyond that individual purchasing function to really transform the entire enterprise.
Thank you. That's very insightful, Ali. So we're going to wrap up this webinar. So we've heard that it's important to break down the silos. Combining CRM and PLM is a way to do that. When you want to do that, you need to focus on value. You need also, you can start by doing things like an asset monetization workshop, as Nanda was suggesting, to be very pragmatic. And as Ali was adding to that, it's important to pay attention to people and the impact all of this will have on people, all of this, including obviously AI. And you need to look at things from the point of view of the people. So, please ask your questions in the Q&A widget. We're going to take some questions from the audience, so please ask your questions. If you've not already done it, feel free to do so. While I'm wrapping up, we will answer the questions right after this. But before we go on to the questions from the audience, here's how you can get more insights on what we just discussed. Number one, download the analyst brief written by Ali, the one that is called Aftermarket 2.0. You have the link here. You can scan the QR code with your phone to get access to it directly. Also, we would love to meet you at Dreamforce. So join us at Dreamforce, the Salesforce conference that is going to happen October 14th to 17th, if I'm not mistaken, in San Francisco. Here you can also scan that QR code that will take you to a registration page where we'll be able to get back in touch with you and set up and work with you on your Dreamforce experience. Salesforce and Siemens will have a manufacturing lounge that we will run together right at the center of Dreamforce. So if you're interested in Dreamforce and you are manufacturers, this will be the place to go. We're looking forward to meeting you there. Now, let's move to the questions from the audience. So I've been receiving some of these questions from the team. So let's look at that. So first question, you talked about digital services and self-service, customer portal. How do you combine self-service with what was presented here in the call? So I think I'm going to turn to Nanda for that question. How does Salesforce provide self-service capabilities for manufacturers?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question, Dom, because when you really think about the manufacturers, whether they go to market directly or through various indirect channels, there's always, end customers, right, who would like to understand, what are their assets, where are they located, what's the overall health of the assets, what's the entire composition, and then, what are the various cases, when carries work orders, the claims that are part of it. So they really want to look at it from a end-to-end holistic life cycle view. And same is the case with the partners, right? When you think about the various dealers, distributors, service providers, third-party installers, the contractors, you name it, they also would like to empowered, to really have all this data in their fingertips in order to effectively serve the customer. Sometimes this data is something that the partner ecosystem tend to maintain themselves. Sometimes they actually, anticipate OEMs to offer that service for them. That either way, I think that's an important element of how do you drive the self-service aspect of it, all the way from looking at the asset data, looking at the service data, looking at the entire, history of the service, what are the parts that are needed, the inventories, and so on and so forth. So that's where Salesforce has, multiple solutions in that space from an experience clouds perspective, right? Whether it's customer facing or whether it's, partner facing, and that could, essentially drive a lot of the self-service elements, which otherwise, is a big challenge that a lot of OEMs face today.
Right, and to complement that, maybe Ashish, could you add to this?
Yes. So what we can bring from the product side to the Salesforce is what we are doing is we are exposing all these 3D navigation for our customers to explore the asset. identify spare parts and order them online, right? So they have access to the service data, the product data, and they should be able to just order it from there. And they can also access the interactive service work instructions that we are authoring in the service plan for the technician, and that will be tailored to their specific equipment, ensuring the technician has the right steps every time. And we are also providing a digital twin in its as maintained state. So the customer sees the exact configuration of the asset. Every time they open it, they see up-to-date configuration of the asset. And finally, the system can deliver service and parts recommendation. I think I talked about it earlier, helping customer make a smarter decision, and they can avoid the downtime of their asset.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how all things come together and see this product data that can be surfaced in self-service capabilities like Salesforce is providing. Now, I think we have time for maybe another question. I guess that is going to be a question for Ali. Ali, the question is, you were talking about servitization. How do you see outcome-based contract becoming a trend in the market? And then how should service organization adapt to this?
Yeah, so first and foremost, the trend is definitely accelerating to have organizations think about ways in which they could sell outcome-based models to their customers, where in those environments, the goals of the end customer are represented in the contracts. And so unless the service organization is able to help the customer meet those goals, they're not getting the revenues that they're expecting from that contract. If I look back 5-10 years ago, the majority of contracts being sold to customers were standard service contracts, 2-3 quarterly PM visits. We're going to show up reactively when something breaks, so you have to call us and then we'll show up. What we're seeing is within, we didn't mention IoT connectivity, but as the evolution of products and equipment has evolved to include remote monitoring capabilities and connectivity from a diagnosis perspective, we're seeing more companies have the tools, information, and insights in real time to be able to offer an outcome to customers. And so I think the biggest opportunity, if you're not already doing this today, if you haven't worked with your technology partners to be able to ingest the rich data that's happening in the field to be able to make more predictive decisions, then you're going to miss that boat when you think about being able to shift into a servitized model that can sell outcomes. Because if you don't know what's happening in the field, if you don't know what's happening with equipment, if you can't monitor that equipment and diagnose it in advance, you won't be able to predictively roll a truck prior to that failure, because the outcome is that the asset is not down. So if you can't be able to provide that level of intelligence and insight to your planning team to have the right part, the right people, the right skills, the person scheduled and dispatched prior to failure, you're never going to get to that outcome-based model opportunity. So I really think this is both a technology and a process challenge that we're seeing be accelerated based off of better, richer data that could be more predictive within service.
Thank you very much, Ali. Again, very insightful. I don't think we have time for further questions, so we'll get back to you after this webinar. Thank you, everyone, for listening. A heartfelt thank you to our panelists. Get in touch with us on LinkedIn, by email, contact your account manager if you want to learn more. Download the brief from IDC. Meet us at Dreamforce. We're looking forward to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching. To learn more about this topic, check out the links in the description. And if you enjoyed what you saw, like the video and subscribe to the channel.